Hello, LinkedIn Live, and welcome to Unlocking Team Potential, AceUp and John Deere's Blueprint for Success. Before we dive in, I want to introduce Dr. Chelsea Carter and Becky Guinn. So Chelsea, let's start with you. How about an introduction?
Yes. Hi, Paul. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be here and, engage in this conversation. So I am currently the director for production workforce experience and insights, but here's the truth. This is officially my first week in this new role. So I will be engaging in this conversation wearing the hat of my previous role as head of people development at Deere, where in that space, I really had the opportunity with my team to think about all things development for our salaried employees when it comes to programs, mentoring, coaching, team development, as well as performance management. And I'm excited because as I transition into labor relations, I actually will probably work with Becky a lot more because my focus will now be thinking about the production workforce, right? And what are those development solutions, opportunities, not just for those employees, but also those that are leaders of the production workforce. I've been with Deere for 13 years. It's been a ride, been in HR the entire time. And I currently live in Chicago. I have 2 adult sons who are awesome. And I have a little fur baby named Coco. And I'm just happy to be here.
Great. Welcome, and in your new role as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, 13 years. Becky, how about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I might be the old lady in the room here. I have 32 years with Deere. Started during college. Yeah, it sounds crazy. I used to be like the youngest in the room for the first half of my career. Now that no longer plays. But yeah, so I've had the opportunity. So I run the factory manager of Waterloo here. It is our largest facility. From a production perspective, we get to make those awesome large tractors. A little pitch, we just introduced a new high horsepower 9R with 830 horsepower with about 5,000 employees in the Cedar Valley. So it might be the coolest job at the company, but also comes with a lot of responsibility to make sure that we continue to deliver. And that's why, it's an honor to be here to talk about how we continue to unlock our teams with these tools.
I love it. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Paul Tripp. I'm the global head of coaching for impact and innovation at AceUp. And, I was thinking this morning, one of the reasons that John Deere really resonates for me is, Becky's been there 32 years. And, she started, probably as a junior somewhere in the production area of John Deere. Is that right, Becky?
Yeah, for sure. Started as just a manufacturing engineer back in the day.
Yeah. And, I had a career, I started on submarines where teamwork, it's all about teamwork, and had a 22-year career as a cryptologic warfare officer. And I think that's why John Deere really resonates for me as the global head of coaching, is because you all are very team oriented. And, it's a team oriented culture. And Chelsea, I know as a team oriented culture, people might often think, oh, you just get tractors out the door. Of course you have teamwork. But John Deere has challenges in terms of fostering a culture of innovation and technology. And so how do you meet your people, the teams, when you have to continually transform the business?
Yeah, so great question. And it's interesting because I think we say teamwork and it's so broad. But what do we really mean by that, right? And so we think about, the innovation and all the thoughts that need to come together, right, for us to be the most innovative. We think about, the transformational journey we're on as a company, and all the minds that we need thinking about things. And, we don't talk about it all the time, but I really think an important word is around collaboration and partnerships. We tend to think about that externally, but what does that look like internally for us to be able to all move in the same direction? And so, I look at it a little bit like a culture shift. And yes, we are very team oriented, but what we're focusing on and the key players in the room have shifted a bit. And so how do we start to navigate things a little bit differently? And so one of the things that I think about, or we thought about strategically, is all of this teamwork and collaboration starts with an individual. right? So what is my role in this collective activity or initiative? And then how do I contribute to the greater, the greater good? And what's the role of that leader? And what's the impact of the environment? And so we really have thought about how do we accelerate this process, because we don't have all the time in the world to figure this out. I mean, Becky can tell you, you just react. It's like, hey, we got to get this moving. And so we intentionally thought about what are ways, tactics, solutions that we can accelerate this process, hence why we're here today. We knew that there would need to be some very intentional team oriented solutions to help us move in a new direction on the same page, as well as integrate that expectation within our enterprise processes. So we have our global performance management. I shared in my previous role, I owned that process. And what I think is really cool is that we value what we do, all the things that we need to do to get that awesome tractor out the door, but also how we do it. Mm-hmm. And being able to hold folks and incorporate it in a way that says, hey, this is of equal value, because we can't get in our own, we need to work hard at not getting in our own way. So I hope that answered your question, but those are some of the things that we've been thinking about from a strategic level on how to help folks like Becky bring it to life so that we can move some things forward in an intentional way.
You mentioned team-oriented solutions, collaboration, and partnership. Mm-hmm. Becky, I'm going to brag on you for just a minute here. You're the first female leader in the 103-year history of John Deere to lead Waterloo, right? Waterloo Works. And you have 5,500 employees. You have the foundry, assembly, components, tractor cabin assembly. You have a major production machine there. So how have you utilized team coaching to really develop team-oriented solutions?
Yeah, for sure. If I reflect about what I walked into and kind of where we've evolved to, right? We'd gone through the pandemic as a team, and all of the challenges that had come through that. We'd seen record increases in demand. We had restructured our business, right? And honestly, that allowed us to kind of break down some of the silos that I would say had even historically existed here in Waterloo when I walked into this 5 years ago, structurally, but not emotionally. You know what I mean? Structurally, but not emotionally. And we're coming into kind of a growth period, a significant amount of investment, which is an awesome opportunity, but it's also a mountain of work, right? And so we knew that we needed to come together as a team and be as functional and collaborative and open to address problems. Because that's what we know in manufacturing, right? Like, all we know is that we're going to have another challenge, another problem, another opportunity to work through. It is how we do that and how quickly we solve those that allows us to differentiate us in this business and continue to create value. And so the tools that Chelsea has been unlocking, the opportunities she's provided for us, being able to work with you guys, have really been foundational for us over the last 2 years on many different levels. Now, not without some, unpacking some baggage through that process, right? And challenging each other, but really foundational in helping us establish some psychological safety in a way that I think is different than we've been historically.
So Becky, before I ask you to give us a real life example of, a challenge that the team faced and how you resolved it, Chelsea, I'm wondering for you, when you think about teams across John Deere, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing, across? Yeah.
Yeah. And Becky, you can nod when it hits you. So there'll be a couple examples that maybe you and your team have experienced, but I would say there are several. One, what's perceived as competing priorities, right? Sometimes they actually are, but I think I use the word perceived for a reason. I also think really understanding the importance of horizontal and vertical partnerships and alignment and impact, right? That it matters. I think sometimes we can get hyper-focused on one and not the other, but both of them are very important. Another area that I think can be a challenge is really understanding, I don't like to use the word complexity, but the interdependencies of division and unit location and function and regional, right? We have all of those at play. And so sometimes I think recognizing and figuring out how to navigate that and who's the decision maker and all of those things and the influencers get in the way. Another one that comes to mind for me is around Deere is 185 plus years old, right? And Becky, you shared you've been with Deere for a very long time, right? We are a relational company. We have friends, we have family, we've been in the same community, our kids are on the same soccer teams. And so we say yes a lot, and sometimes it's hard for us to say no and to create those business boundaries to help us move in the same direction. And so as much as that's some of our secret sauce, I think as we're moving rapidly and we got to have, there's some trade-offs, being able to say no, and what work aren't we going to do to prioritize others. And then the last challenge is a cultural thing with us. Again, we've been around for a long time because we've done some things well. We want to do things right. And with that can come some perfectionism, and we got to get it just so. And it's hard to let go when it's time for us to iterate. So transitioning from figuring it all out, and it's taking all that time to do so, to shifting, to iterating, failing fast, pivoting, making the decision based on what we know today, but maybe we don't know all of it. So I gave you a laundry list because I think about those challenges often, but those are things that are top of mind when I think about opportunities that we have to kind of just address, figure out. And like you were saying, Becky, there's the box and wires changes, but there's that whole emotion and that mindset shift. And some of those play into those challenges.
What do you think, Becky? Do you have an example? I know some of that resonates.
No, I think so. I mean, so it's interesting, right? I think as we kind of went through this reorg, it was all about, Deere leading in technology, and, yet we build a lot of products. And so we feel like we're, manufacturing is kind of where rubber hits the road. And there's all these change dynamics that the company is trying to drive. And we've got to kind of assimilate that in and really get the masses, the people here, to believe that where we're going matters and that they matter and that they're an important cog in that function. And that was definitely a big piece of that. And so, that, and then, the significant investments, the execution pressures, all of the dynamics that were going on, again, really made us need to kind of take this team dynamic to the next level, because we knew if we were going to be able to mirror, to demonstrate, to execute what the vision was that our seniors had, that we had to be the most high functioning team. But that means you're also going to have some challenges, right? Not everybody was bought in on day one. Just because we say it at the top doesn't mean the bottom buys in. And so our job was to develop a way to allow for those open conversations, to be able to acknowledge them, to address them, and to make the team feel heard, and to get them to buy into kind of what we want to deliver here in a real positive, productive way at the end of the day.
Becky, one of the things that you've done really well with the team coaching is you've used the Hogan as a baseline. You've used AceUp's Team Compass. You've used it to integrate new leaders. When new leaders come in, you help them kind of identify with their team's roles and responsibilities. And I'm wondering if you could also give an example of a change that's, been really effective using a team approach, the team coaching approach.
Absolutely. I mean, I think so. When we started on this journey, our mission was like, we'd just come through some of the most challenging years in our history, right? Whether it was a pandemic, the strike, the changes, and all of that. And we wanted to catch our breath as a leadership team. And that's where the Hogan allowed us to really kind of understand our strengths, manage all these changes. But it also unpacked maybe some areas that weren't as functional as they needed to be, right? And while if we stay at a higher level conversation, we can say it's great, but then when you really look at what's going on, we found some opportunities just that we needed to come together as a team. And so a great example for us was really around our safety initiatives. So, we had hired over 1,000 new employees. Our OSHA recordable rate had trended for 18 months in the wrong direction, and we'd come out of some of the historic low performance. And if anybody works in manufacturing, I mean, that is a call to action on significant risk in our business. And so, we had a safety leader team, that was saying, hey, do this and this. But the manufacturing team wasn't bought into all of that, and Jason was new to the organization, relatively new. He was leveraging a lot of my political capital, I would say, in trying to drive those initiatives. And yet you could just kind of hear it behind closed doors, that bubbling up, that people weren't buying into it and the results weren't going in the right way. So that just puts tension into the system, right? And so we knew that we needed to come together as a team and honestly put all of those emotions on the table, right? The emotions of, hey, if you guys would just do what I tell you to do better, that would be great. And the emotions of, hey, you don't know us and you're not a part of this and that's not going to work. And the things that you're asking us to do aren't going to move the needle. Like all of those emotions existed at different levels in the team and were a lot of backdoor conversations, right? And I think you even started to see that in the multiple levels of team coaching, which that's a good conversation we should talk about too later, Paul. But so we came together, we kind of identified the problem. We did a lock-in and we did kind of a strategic planning setup, right? That kind of maybe identified how much tension was there. And then we pulled Paul in to kind of facilitate a lock-in. And it was not, there were moments, right? There was tension in the room. Paul pokes the bear a little bit. He kind of has had these, we kind of set that up where he had individual conversations with really the entire team kind of coming into it, which paid dividends, right? So he knew kind of people's pressure points or frustrations. But instead of letting those kind of sit underneath the table and fester, like we kind of brought those up. Right. But that creates tension in the system. Why are you not participating in those dynamics? But we came out of it with, kind of landing with, okay, we're going to, park some things, right, that we're not all in consensus on. We might let people kind of pivot on some things that they think are really important. And then foundationally, we're going to continue some basic things. But there was, I would say, some tension coming out of that. The team has continued to kind of work through that. But it has really allowed for a lot more open dialogue because a lot of that got out there and people were able to air it and then they were able to kind of let it go. And so it was interesting to me. Even yesterday we sat in one of our safety council meetings and it might have been the best conversation we've had in, over a year. Like we're now coming together in person. We're having real conversations about, what are the significant risks, not just are we managing a metric, checking boxes, what are we doing for corrective action, all different levels, the teams were engaged. And then more importantly, from my perspective, right, while there was some tension in the system, they have now kind of been able to start to work together with each other, right? They kind of like, now, the ops leaders are calling the safety manager. They're talking through strategies. How do you best position this? What do you try to go get leverage? Who's going to take this ball? And we are seeing a step function improvement in our overall safety performance because, leadership is a big play into that conversation. But more importantly, the teams are working together better, right? They're self-solving. It doesn't require my political capital in this conversation. Jason's not coming to me. He's not going to them saying Becky said. They're literally working together as a high functioning team. I mean, I might work myself out of a job here. But it's great. It's great. And it is so powerful. And the psychological safety conversation is huge. And it's moving the needle, right? At the end of the day, there's power in a team. We're stronger together. I truly believe that. And if it all comes up to me and I got to have 1,000 backdoor conversations, we're never going to be a great team. Right? We got to put it all on the table. We got to unpack it. We got to be great together and we're stronger like that. So it's been huge.
Chelsea, what's it like to hear that?
It warms my heart. Yeah. I know it's like we're not supposed to be all touchy-feely, but honestly, that's the point, right? That's the point.
And it's pretty, Chelsea. Like and that's conflict that people made uncomfortable.
Yes.
Still out there, right? Like, but it's out there, and now they like love each other. Like it's kind of, I just kind of was laughing yesterday. Like I was a little bit joyful too in this conversation.
Yeah, and I think the reason it warms my heart is because I know how hard that is. Mm-hmm. And I like that you are willing to be transparent about it is not easy. And there is tension. But if you can stay the course and if you can get the right support, right? To have and have the right conversations in the right way and keep folks intact. And to your point, having that psychological safety. I mean, there's just so many benefits to getting to the other side. So that's awesome.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about you, Becky, is you allow conversations to take place and you show bravery. You know, you allow the team to engage in a way you just hold space for them. And that's such a beautiful thing to see. You know, as a leader, you don't have to exert your authority. You can actually sit there in the tension and allow me to poke the bear and allow people to talk and engage. And it really has been transformational.
Yeah, and sometimes even I'm putting tension into the system, right? Because the team knows that if we're all holding each other accountable, right? Because sometimes they weren't comfortable holding each other accountable, so I would kind of step in. But they didn't like me stepping in to do that to their peers, so they felt the need to self-manage, right? Which was great. I mean, I could have done 1,000 backdoor conversations, and they never would have started to figure out how to go do that if I wasn't also leaning in a little bit and putting myself out there to some degree. You know what I mean? And so Paul and I were able to really work together well and figure out how to strategically set that one up. I think the other thing that was super helpful as we think about the team coaching was it wasn't Paul just doing it with my staff and listening to my teams talk about what they think or perceive from their teams, but we took it down to kind of that next level. So we affected over probably 80 different leaders across Waterloo, giving them some level of exposure. So we created, you know, the teams underneath it, right? The different operations teams would come together and have those open conversations. And I think, you know, Paul, we were able to kind of, you know, understand, create psychological safety, understand what some of those top issues were there, where these other team tensions were, and get a really good feel for, you know, what this organization is dealing with and what problems we need to go solve. And honestly, they're grateful because I think they felt heard in a way that we had never done before, right? And so all of a sudden it starts to raise up. It wasn't through a leader's filter, right? Because sometimes that happens. Like the team's saying X, the leader doesn't want to represent that. That might make them look bad. But we were all vulnerable all the way through the organization about kind of what problems we need to go solve. And that has created, you know, not just with like my direct team, but honestly throughout this whole organization, a level of trust and buy-in and how we work together and go move this forward.
Yep, I agree. Chelsea, I'm curious for you, what can we learn from this, you know, successful transformation at John Deere? What could companies out here learn from what Becky shared and what you're seeing?
Yeah. The first is it is not a passive process. It's not going to just naturally happen. And I think what Becky was sharing is so true. If we rest on it's the leader's initiative and folks go do, it's not a sustainable approach. You probably will get a few wins or you'll at least check a couple of boxes early on, but it's not a sustainable cultural shifting approach. So you really, leaders and participants, have to lean in. I think the word vulnerable is very important, and also be very intentional and specific as to what you're going after and what is the expectation. You know, the last thing I'll say as a lesson that I am learning, and I've believed this, but I think it's coming through really clear here, is leader modeling is critical.
Yeah.
Leaders can't say, oh, we need to work collaboratively and have all these things and do all these things, but yet they're not modeling that same behavior. Because as we all know, we're humans, we take in a lot of inputs, but what we tend to focus most on is what we see, not what people say. And so that leader modeling, and Becky, I appreciate all that you're doing in that space to really help show not just your team, but other leaders in the organization, the importance of you, like you said, I had to lean in. Right. You might have been disrupted, right?
I mean, it's not just modeling everything's great, because it's not, right?
And then that's
modeling
the
that there's problems and tensions and things you really got to resolve. And then the team's like all in. Yes.
Yep. And I just think that's imperative. So those would be the three areas that, or the big lessons. I mean, there's a lot, but those are the ones that are really top of mind that I think are most impactful.
Okay, so for the both of you here, I love what you're saying because, the leader is the hero, is the model that doesn't work anymore, right? It's the leader that can hold space, for conversations to take place. And yet sometimes I hear out there, I don't want to unpack Pandora's box. I don't want to bring in team coaching because I'm going to unpack the Pandora's box. What would you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, if you want the organization to buy in and give that extra mile, 100%, right? There's, they gotta feel like it's meaningful work. They gotta feel like it's valued, and they gotta know where they can impact and make a difference, And I mean, even in the safety conversation, Paula, you saw it. That first conversation, I had people sitting on the sidelines, like, well, safety used to report to me, and now they don't.
Right.
Right? Yeah, no, they don't. But like, you were still a key leader on staff, right? And it took some of that engagement and some tension, right? And some of the peers even calling each other out, right? Whether in those conversations or outside of those conversations, to make people really realize that they're all part of it. And now, like, we're sitting in this meeting yesterday and we're doing they're talking about the Gemba walks where they all get together as a group. One of the people that were like, they didn't feel like they were part of it, now is like literally advocating for the process, what they did, how impactful it is, and how they can make a difference. Like, it is night and day. It's just magic. Again, it's just magic. But there was tension in that conversation, right? And people had to kind of work through it and then decide, and we had to create a forum that people could kind of show up and different things like that. But and then it starts to become sustainable, and you see it in the results. Again, if people don't buy in, you're not going to get the results. People will, there's okay, I'm going to do minimum viable to get this done, so you feel good that your initiative is supported, Becky. But it doesn't make sustainability at the end of the day. It's just, and people don't feel great about it. You know what I mean? Like, nobody feels great about it. They feel great when they feel like they're part of it. They're driving it. They see the impact. They're on a winning team. They have a team that lifts them up every day that they trust. And now people want to come to work and do a great job, and you see that in our results, and you see it just in just how we feel as a team,
Chelsea, what would you say to that?
Well, okay, first, my face hurts from smiling.
I know.
But I would say, as you were talking, Becky, one of the things that I did not mention previously on What's a Lesson is it does take time. And you have to allow for the process. It's like you have to trust the process. Maybe I should say it that way. Now, the process we could time bound the process, but to your point, if you're really wanting sustainable behavior change and culture change, you're going to have to bring some things up, right? You're going to have to work through it, and there's going to be some tensions. There's going to be that pushback. Then the people are going to kind of coalesce. I mean, there's literally a process that's happening and occurring. And so you kind of have to trust it, if you will, and allow the space, as you had using your language, Paul, for that to occur so that you can get to what you were talking about, the end result. Now, when you were in the meeting and people weren't quite buying in, it was probably hard to imagine that you would be at that place, but you are now because you allowed the process and the space and the time to do that, to get folks to buy in.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard today is, sustainable cultural change. Becky, you have individual coaching. How has that helped you drive that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to some degree, the individual coaching helps me figure out what role I need to have. The other thing that's been great is your insights, not only to my team, but to the teams to understand where I can add more value or less value and need to kind of push or step back in was invaluable. It was so much better than what I would call regular individual coaching, which is, hey, I'm going to do a 360 survey. Okay, I've got a one-time snapshot of people's perspectives of Becky Guinn. Let's go solve for that. This was like a real-time process because you were dialed in at multi-levels in the organization that allowed me then to understand and help prioritize my leadership styles where I could add value, the role that I needed to play in a different way that I think has been more effective than anything I've done in the past.
We're at time, but I want to say, if an organization out there listening today is looking for systemic cultural change, here's a great example of how individual coaching and team coaching throughout an organization at many levels can really drive change. AceUp.com is a place you can go to learn more. But Chelsea and Becky, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Great examples today.
Absolutely.
You're
It's an honor
very
to be
welcome.
part of this, Paul. So thank you for the support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.